get started. We have a few things on consent. We've got VAR 2022-035. This is a variance for Splash Car Wash submitted by SCM Architects for property located at 2132 East Joyce Boulevard, Unit 100. The project is the property is zoned CS and contains approximately 2.16 acres. The request is for a variance from driveway separation and parking lot design requirements. Gretchen Harrison was originally the planner on this one and will be present on Monday's meeting. But in the interim, she is recommending the item be placed on the consent agenda. And this is a location that you've seen before. This is at 2132 East Joyce Boulevard. They are requesting a variance to their, hopefully it's showing on there.
Yes, it is. Just slow.
To their driveway requirements for access to Joyce Boulevard. And I'm completely blanking on actually what the parking lot design requirement was at the moment. I'm sorry, I'm a little thrown off.
I think it's the driveway between the principal facade and the...
Thank you. Okay, I read this report. Anyway, yeah, it's a variance from the driveway separation requirements for access onto Joyce. So for the distance between Old Missouri and their proposed drive, and then to place a parking lot in front of the structure. So staff is recommending in favor. The item has been through a few rounds of other variance reviews. It did receive a Board of Adjustment variance. It also went through the conditional use permit route. Staff finds that by supporting these variance requests, it wouldn't necessarily undermine the intent of those ordinances, and would protect their right to access along Joyce Boulevard since they do have the frontage there. Clearly, I'm not very well equipped to answer any questions on this one, but I can certainly write them down for you and make sure that Gretchen is able to answer those on Monday. So are there any questions on that? Okay, hearing none, we will then move along to our next item. That is VAR 2022-021. This is a variance submitted by AB Joint Ventures LLC for property located at 4257 West Santa Fe Street. The property is zoned RIU, Residential Intermediate Urban, and contains approximately 0.13 acres. The request is for a variance from UDC 16608F2 and 16623C2 for access management and vehicular access requirements. And Ryan Umberger is the planner on this one.
Sure, thank you. This is one that you saw at the last Planning Commission meeting, and just as a reminder, it's on the west side of South Rupel Road. It is roughly a half mile north of Rupel and MLK's intersection. This is a newly platted lot in the Town West subdivision, and they are requesting variances from a couple of different sections of our code, one for access management and one for vehicular access requirements. Basically, they are proposing to have a driveway onto West Santa Fe Street rather than side loading through the alley that adjoins to the west. At the June 27th meeting, the item was tabled, and the applicant was not present at the meeting. We haven't received any revisions in the interim, but we did speak with the applicant. They mentioned some unforeseen circumstances that prevented them from being able to attend the meeting. Specifically, the applicant that I mentioned, spoke with, mentioned a trip to the hospital that prevented them from not for them themselves, but for a family member that inhibited them from being able to attend the meeting. Staff's recommendation is still denial of the variance, and I can stand for any questions that you have.
I was going to mention, this is kind of like the access management variances that you've seen on commercial properties, where we have the same concern with a property being able to access any street that it touches. I don't know what the final plat shows. If they had for some reason shown a driveway on the alleyway in the final plat that was approved, then that might be different. But I think our office is recommending granting the variance because they do have a constitutional right to access Santa Fe Street. And I'm sorry I didn't catch this before the last meeting.
Yeah, that's all right. Does the commission have any questions about that? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the next item is LSD 2021-034. This is large-scale development submitted by Jorgensen and Associates for property located at 685 West Van Ash Drive. The property is zone C3, Central Commercial, and contains approximately 38.72 acres. The request is for a 422-unit multifamily complex with associated parking. As you recall, this item was tabled at the last meeting. At the recommendation of staff, there were some issues that needed to be clarified, or I guess some additional information that staff was looking for from the applicant as far as the proposed traffic study. The applicant is proposing to construct two internal streets, essentially one that would connect to North Shiloh Drive along the southern part of the property, and one that would basically extend North Roosevelt Avenue on the northern part of the property. The applicant was requesting to build regional link street sections at those locations, and staff needed more information before being able to basically recommend in favor of that street section. So with this round, the applicant did submit some additional traffic study information for the proposed build out of the entire master planned project. So kind of showing that a street section of that scale may indeed be necessary in the future. So with that, staff is recommending that the applicant basically dedicate 92 feet of right-of-way and essentially build half of the regional link street section at this time. So the right-of-way would be dedicated in each of those sections, but they would essentially build 2 lanes of traffic with a median and then sidewalks at the back of the right-of-way in each of those locations to basically enable the right-of-way to be in place should it be needed in the future, but minimize the level of street that would actually be built at this time, since so that it could be more incrementally developed as the overall site develops. Happy to answer any questions. So that was some clarification there on that tabling, and staff is recommending at this round that the item be recommended for approval. There were still a couple minor comments that were unaddressed by urban forestry as well, but those could be addressed with the permitting process. And other than that, I can answer any questions you might have.
So this, in the packet, there's a conceptual master plan that says preliminary, really big on it. So
it's very preliminary.
So the way this is oriented, the part that we're really looking at is just the 2 bottom quadrants, is that right?
Yes, I'd have to pull that up specifically to make sure I'm looking at the right map, but essentially, yeah, if you can see where I-49 is and where Shiloh is proposed to be extended into the site, and then Roosevelt would be extended into the site. So it's really just kind of on that traffic study map. Let me just pull that one.
Do they have all the yellow arrows with the ADG?
Yep. Mm-hmm. Get that here.
So it's basically all south of Van Ash.
Yes, it is all south. Yes, everything on this project is south of Van Ash. So there is some information on that master plan that's in your packet that does include development north of Van Ash as well. But we did try to focus in on staff's report on those sections. I may steal the screen share, Ryan, if you don't mind.
But they've only shown us one giant building, so we don't know anything about all those other buildings that they have color-coded in some form or fashion.
Correct. All that is on the table for this development at this time, again, this is a very preliminary, just master plan drawing, just really for illustrative purposes. The area in question where this development is coming in, try to get north up here, is basically this building here, if you can all see that. So the traffic count that they're showing here would be for basically everything that they're proposing to come in and here. So it would be this street and this portion of street.
But it is theoretically a mixed-use development, although what's coming right now is all residential.
All that's coming in right now is residential, but theoretically, in the future, they would like to see more mixed uses. Can I answer any other clarifying questions? Okay, well, with that, we will move on to the next item is ADM 2022-037. This is an administrative item submitted by Roush Coleman for property located at 961 East Sparrow Circle. The properties are zoned RSF 8, residential single family, 8 units per acre, and contains approximately 0.2 acres total. The request is to amend the master street plan dedication requirements for Creekside Meadows. You actually saw this concurrent plat last planning commission that came through. They're looking to create basically 9 resultant lots from those original 4 after the removal of the floodplain through that letter of map reduction. So this administrative item is simply to take their request to not have to dedicate additional right-of-way to the city council. So we, with that concurrent plat approval from the last planning commission, the recommendation was that they essentially that they not dedicate that additional right-of-way and that they keep it in line with their final plat's approval. We are recommending in favor of that. This item would be eligible for consent if the commission wants to consider it there, and then it will go on. This particular item will then go on to the city council for their final approval. I'm happy to answer any other clarifying questions you might have about that.
Let's put it on consent if everybody's all right with that.
Okay. We can do that. Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll go to VAR 2022-036. This is a variance submitted by Anderson Engineering for property located at 3448 North College Avenue. The property is zoned C2 thoroughfare commercial. It contains approximately 1.4 acres. The request is for variances to UDC 16608F, access management, and 17204 parking lot design standards. And Ryan Umberger is the planner on this one.
Thank you. This property is in North Fayetteville. It's on the east side of College, at the mid-block between Millsap to the north and Masonic Drive to the south. This property is zoned C2 thoroughfare commercial and contains approximately 1.4 acres. Currently, there's a roughly 11,000 square foot structure that was built in 1985 on the property. It's the site of Blue Cliff College, which is a medical training school that has made use of the structure since 2009, according to the business licenses that I've been able to dig up on this. So this is an instance where the applicant is requesting variances more or less to get their ducks in a row for a future development plan that would come in. So we don't have a specific development that's been submitted for review, but through a pre-app meeting, we identified a few issues that they needed to work out with their parking lot design. So they're requesting 3 variances. The first is for access management. So their access is onto College Avenue, which is classified as a regional high-activity link street. Typically, that requires a 250-foot curb cut separation distance, and they're proposing to utilize an existing access point. The second variance is to the typical 2-way drive aisle width. That is typically limited to 24 feet, and they are requesting 27 and 28-foot drive aisles in certain instances. And the third variance is for their driveway width, which again is limited to, for 2-way is typically limited to 24 feet. Their driveway, as you can kind of see on the map here, is shared with the property to the south. There is not a platted access easement at this location, and from the conversation that I had with the applicant's team, they said that there is actually not a private access easement either. So again, they're just they're requesting to maintain the existing curb cut onto College. Staff is recommending. I should acknowledge we did receive some public comment. The public comment we received was involved with that property that you see to the north at 1023 East Millsap. There was a tenant in the property owner at that location expressed concerns about the circulation of the site plan, or the circulation shown in the site plan, and specifically that some users would likely be driving through their parking lot to access Millsap rather than College directly. So their issues were really with cross connectivity. That's not a variance that was being requested, and we haven't received any public comment specifically for any of the 3 variances that are being requested. Staff is supportive of all 3 variance requests. We are recommending an added condition that 3 2-inch caliper trees with a large shade canopy are planted to offset those wider than typical drive aisle widths. I don't have anything further on that, so I can stand for any questions that y'all might have.
Ryan, if we put this on consent, would the request for the trees ride with it?
Yes, that recommended condition would go if this were on consent.
I think that looking at it, it looks pretty straightforward. It has a shared access point off of College. Is that right?
Correct.
And then on the other side is a right in, right out.
By the other side, can you clarify that?
The next connection, which I guess might be off the neighboring property. Yeah, that'd be off the neighboring property. That's a right in, right out. Looks like.
Right, I think that is a right in, right out. That's the Jiffy Loop that was recently constructed.
Okay, this seems, it looks pretty straightforward, and we generally do grant these for very, very auto-oriented businesses.
I'm sorry, I'm going to be the dissenter. I'm not going to say I'm going to vote against on this, but I would like it to remain off just because there's been some issues on this that we've debated regarding the College Avenue property in the past.
Game on.
Okay. I did just want to clarify, I just looked at the, oh, it is right in, right out. Never mind. It is right in, right out. I stand corrected to myself. Any other questions on that item?
Are they gonna come back and ask for like 3 more variances because they need to have a drive aisle between their building and the street?
At this location, it's zone C2.
So they don't have to do that?
They don't have to ask for a variance for that.
Okay, good questions. Anything else? Next up, we have VAR 2022-037. This is a variance submitted by the City of Fayetteville for a property located at 1100 North Woolsey Avenue. The property is zoned P1 institutional and contains approximately 2.9 acres. The request is to create a lot without access to water and sewer. So this overall site, so the tract you see in question is the tract that the variance is needed for. The overall site is for a lot split that's coming through in order to develop Fire Station 10 on the basically the northeast corner of Woolsey and North Street. So there's an associated lot split that basically a remnant parcel is going to be created here that you can see on this map. And that remnant parcel will not have direct access to water and sewer once the lot split is finalized. So that requires a variance from the Planning Commission in order to approve. Staff is recommending in favor. The parcel in question would remain with the county, and is the intent of that ordinance is to make sure that we're not creating undevelopable lots within the city. In this particular instance, the property ownership will remain with the county. We think that a future property line adjustment could be made to actually still provide water and sewer access to that potential lot should some form of development need to happen in the future. But in this particular instance, we don't see that by granting this variance, the intent of that ordinance would be undermined, basically. So we are recommending in favor. It is worth mentioning that the lot where the fire station will potentially be located will still have access to water and sewer. So that's not the lot in question. It's this one here. So I can answer any questions. This could be eligible for consent if the commission is open to that. Other than that, happy to.
I'm sure this is, because I would be interested in going to consent, but I am sure this is, my question is above everybody's pay grade. And why is that whole transfer is not happening from the county to the city? Why are we creating this tiny little sliver?
So actually it is, so the city is acting as the county's agent in this particular instance. So it's actually at the county's request that the sliver remain, which the surveyor on the property did mention in his request letter, and I should have clarified. So it's basically happening at the county's request that this tract remain as it is.
It may also be a federal deal because all of that property has
The
a
VA.
restriction from the VA. So they had to release their restriction in order for the city to acquire the piece that we're getting.
That is true.
So they may want that buffer between us and the VA up north.
I'm gonna put a big sound wall up there
Perhaps, yeah.
for the sirens bothering the people at the hospital. Okay, I'm fine with this going to consent. It seems like it's sort of like paperwork.
It felt that way to staff, but if the commission, if anyone else wants to keep it off, we're open to that too. Consent, okay. Hearing nothing, we'll move it to consent. The next item is CCP 2022-07. This is a concurrent plat submitted by Jorgensen and Associates for a property located at 567 North Cresswell Drive. The property is zoned RSF 8, residential single family, 8 units per acre, and contains approximately 12.2 acres. The request is to create 59 residential lots. So you've all seen this site before. It's come through previously as 2 separate large-scale developments. So phase 1, you can kind of see on this map, starting to get identified with addresses and streets on GIS. So both phases have been approved and are currently in the permitting process. And basically what this request is to plat all of those lots. So it's one development opportunity that subdivision developers have, is to, rather than preliminary plat and final plat, you can actually develop as a large scale where you come through and you do your streets and buildings at the same time, and then when all that's in place, you can come through and create the lots. Or really you can create the lots at any time, or, once the infrastructure's in. So that's what the request is. It's not adding any additional impact to the site that wasn't already approved with the large scale development. They're basically just drawing the lines for those individual lots with this request. It could be eligible for consent. The reason staff might want the commission to consider it staying off is that we did receive some public comment on the item at subdivision committee from some of the surrounding neighbors. We also interacted with a property owner to the east who had some concerns about just development pressure in general and overall considerations for green space in the area. So it could be on consent, but I will leave it. That's the commission's discretion.
Let's just leave it off just in case folks have something that they want to talk about.
So what are the conditions? Just the typical thing that the right-of-way dedications? It's not any specific condition.
Well, there is worth mentioning. So there were some off-site street improvement assessments that were actually conditions of approval with those large scales. So with this, we just want to make sure those are paid prior to any signatures on the plat. So those aren't, the assessments that are included in those conditions of approval aren't new. They are just, it's really just a tidying up situation to make sure that's all accounted for prior to any signatures.
But the street connectivity will be made where those streets are and everything?
Yes.
That's
There is one assessment for a temporary turnaround. So there's a cul-de-sac on the kind of the northwestern side, the northern property line, that is temporary. So if and when it's really just there as a fire turnaround. So if and when connectivity is ever made to the north, that cul-de-sac will go away. And that's what one of the assessments is for, is to make sure that there's money in the coffers to do that when it needs to happen.
So the street to the west will be connected?
Yes. They are tying into all of those stub outs, basically.
Okay.
So it meets the minimum requirements, no variances?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep,
Thanks.
correct. Leave it off, consent? That's the last I heard? Okay.
Are the inquiries coming from outside or from people? Are there already
People
houses?
in the general area, so.
So they're not part of phase 1, people are not complaining about it? Okay.
No.
That happens.
That is, yeah, that is not the situation here. It is surrounding neighbors. outside of this development. Okay, next up, we have vacation VAC 2022-017. This is submitted by Joseph Holcomb for property located at 9 South Block Avenue. The property is zoned MSC, Main Street Center, and contains approximately 0.7 acres. The request is to vacate a 30-square-foot portion of alley right-of-way. Gretchen Harrison is the planner on this. I'm apparently warmed up and can now speak to this item a little bit more clearly. The request is, it is a very small amount of alley right-of-way behind behind that building there, you can see there, that the applicant wishes to vacate so
Is
that
Joseph on this call today?
I believe he may be, so
Yes, I'm seeing him.
I'm not sure, actually, I guess I'll ask Blake whether you need to recuse from agenda session if it's an item or he's
He's fine.
He's just
So
here, okay.
my advice to him at the last meeting was to not speak on behalf of the item. I think
Okay.
he's planning on having somebody else to speak if it's not on consent
Okay.
for whatever reason.
Okay, great, so, yeah, so he is on the call today. And, yeah, so it is a request to vacate just a very small amount of alley right-of-way in order for a stair to be constructed in the rear of the building, to provide access to what is a proposed rooftop access area. All of the necessary sign-offs were received. Staff is recommending in favor of the request. It is a minimal request. There was one condition of approval that I believe there was a water meter that needed to be moved into the right-of-way so that it could be accessed, but other than that, staff is supporting the request and all of the necessary documents were received. So I can try to answer any questions. Again, Gretchen, I can also write them down so that the planner who has more intimate knowledge with the item can answer those as well. I do see that Joe has his hand raised. I'm going to, if you want to unmute yourself.
Okay, yeah, I was kicked off right at the beginning, so I wasn't able to say anything up front. But yeah, I'll recuse myself, and I've got the architect to speak during the actual meeting.
Great, thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Were there any other questions on this one? It could be eligible for consent if you wanted it to be, but
Does this impact the functionality of the alleyway in any way?
it didn't appear to, and that's essentially why staff is recommending in favor. It could still function as an alley.
Well, I think it's a great idea to have access to the roof, so sounds like fun to me. Let's put this on consent if that's all right with everybody.
That's fine with me, and so I'm assuming that Commissioner Holcomb will be recusing from the consent approval then.
That is what he would need to do, yes.
Okay, I understand that. I'll do that then.
Okay. All right, next item is CUP 2022-017. This is a conditional use permit submitted by Zara Niederman for a property located at 223 East 7th Street. The property is zoned DG Downtown General and contains 0.4 acres. The request is for use unit 16 shopping goods for a tattoo parlor in a DG zoning district. So the request here is for a tattoo parlor to be located at this location. That use specifically is called out in use unit 16, which is the conditional use in the downtown general zoning district, which is why it's before you today. Gretchen Harrison is the planner on this one, so we'll be able to speak more specifically about it. We have not received any public comment about it. There are a few conditions of approval that staff has recommended. The applicant is showing some parking spaces to the south of the existing structure. It's a residential structure currently that they would like to convert to this more commercial use. There was a non-residential use, perhaps an office that has operated out of here previously. But with that, they'd like to install 4 parking spaces to the south of the lot, and then they have one parking space from the existing drive. There's an alleyway to the west of the property that they'd like to use for that access. So staff is recommending a couple of conditions that they may pave a portion of that alleyway to help prevent any track out. It is gravel currently, and to treat those proposed parking spaces as we would we have some additional requirements in other portions of our code for unpaved parking spaces, so we'd like them to, at the very least, make sure those parking spaces are demarcated in a way that's consistent with that portion of code. There are some other conditions of approval that staff is recommending. One is that any biohazards or sharps waste be kept inside the structure so that they don't have any issues, so that it's not disposed of in our normal trash facilities, that they dispose of that properly. Other than that, again, we haven't received any public comment, and I can answer any questions you might have or also direct them to Gretchen for Monday.
Is there street parking permitted on this street?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. If there is, then they would likely be subject to parking only on one side, but I can definitely have that clarified.
So they're requesting 4 spaces because there's no parking required.
Correct, yeah. Yep. They technically are gonna have 5. They have one.
The driveway and
The
4
driveway,
more.
yep.
They could actually tandem park a driveway. They might have 6 spaces,
Potentially.
plus the street.
Any other questions about that? Okay. We will move along to CUP 2022.
Oh, I think you said this just, sorry. So tattoo parlors are specifically called out as conditional uses in
Yes.
DG.
They are, under
Just-
use unit 16.
Just want to make sure I understood.
Yep.
I think we need to clean up some of our.
It is, yeah, I think there's room for consideration. There could potentially be room for consideration there, but at this point in time, that is where it's located. Any further questions? Sorry, before I
No.
take off. Okay. We've got CUP 2022-018. This is a conditional use permit submitted by Jorgensen and Associates for property located at 3030 East Mission Boulevard. The property is in the zone P1 institutional and contains approximately 23.3 acres. The request is for 2 temporary portable classrooms, and Ryan Umberger is the planner on this one.
Thank you. I do have a correction on that acreage that hopefully I'll make sure it gets corrected on the final agenda. The property itself is 58.19 acres. So this is in East Fayetteville. It's just east of the intersection of Crossover and Mission. The property is zoned P1 institutional. It's the site of McNair Middle School and Vandergriff Elementary. The applicant is requesting a conditional use permit to build 2 temporary portable classrooms on the subject property. Temporary school facilities are called out under use unit 2, citywide uses by conditional use permit. The applicant says McNair Middle School has reached the maximum capacity for the 2022 to 2023 school year. They are anticipating that those capacity issues will be resolved with the construction of John L. Colbert Middle School over on South Rupel. We've not received any public comment on this item, and we are recommending approval of the request, and I can stand for any questions.
Are the conditions all just about how it's sited and the lighting and that sort of thing?
Yeah, that the size of, yeah, yes.
Any other questions on this?
But this can't go to consent,
I
right?
can't because it's conditional
Conditional
use.
use.
Yep. All right, next up, we've got CUP 2022-015. This is a conditional use permit submitted by Sophia Joan for property located at 2317 West Hatfield Street. The property is zoned RSF4, residential single-family 4 units per acre, and contains approximately 0.4 acres. The request is for use unit 4, cultural and recreational facilities in RSF4 zoning, and Ryan Umberger is the planner on this one.
Sure, thank you. So this property is in West Fayetteville. It's located roughly 900 feet north of the intersection of Sang and Weddington. It's on the south side of Hatfield Street. There's a single family dwelling that was constructed in 1960 that occupies the site. This item has quite a significant bit of backstory on this. So this request came to us through a zoning violation that we received back in February originally. There's been a lot of activity and phone calls that we've received from neighbors about various complaints on the property. Many of the complaints we've received, we've been unable to validate as zoning and development concerns, but we did identify 2 zoning and development violations, and this conditional use permit is intended to resolve one of those. So those 2 violations we sent a violation letter for was one for over occupancy of the property. We've since received an affidavit from the property owner stating that they are complying with the single family dwelling limitation of 3 unrelated persons living in a single family residence. And then the other violation was for the use of the property. Since we've had correspondence with neighbors and the property owner, there have been complaints about folks visiting the site, activities on the site, including decor and artwork on the front of the property, as well as other messaging that seems to indicate that the site is being used as a cultural and recreational facility. There have been complaints about lights and noise generated from the property, particularly with regard to it being used as an outdoor music facility where they're advertising events. They're not paid events, but they are advertising to host people to come listen to outdoor music on the property. So in the staff report, it gives sort of a timeline of the various complaints and communication that we've had with the applicant precipitating the request. There's one section that I would like to acknowledge that is there was a special event permit that was submitted in April for a block party. That special event permit was approved and then revoked after further consideration and collaboration across different divisions. Generally, planning is not involved in those special, or I should say historically, planning has not been involved in those special event permits, but we have changed some of our processes in light of this and other violations that we've received. The applicant, in this case, they are requesting a conditional use permit to use the property for what they're calling OSIC. They describe it as an inclusive rehabilitative community space. There's not a specific use unit that's identified in the request letter, but staff is, we made a determination based on the scope of what's being requested that the use largely falls under use unit 4, which is a cultural and recreational facility. The outdoor music component of it, we are considering an outdoor music facility, which is typically categorized under use unit 35. Use unit 35 is not a permitted use, nor is it a conditional use that you can request in the RSF4 zoning district. So staff is recommending basically that the use of the property as an outdoor music establishment cease. Basically, we're kind of separating that out from our consideration of the rest of the conditional use permit. There are a handful of, or I guess I should highlight the public comment we've received. We've received a substantial amount of public comment from neighbors. Uniformly, it's been in opposition to the conditional use request. It's also been come to us in the form of violations. Neighbors have brought up issues with noise, traffic lights, and apparent signage on the property. They've also expressed issues with activities and events that have been promoted on a Facebook page. We've received about 80 pictures and screenshots of activity on the site and screenshots from Facebook of various events, including one that was forwarded earlier this afternoon for an event that appears to be planned for this evening. So the other complaints we've received are about over occupancy, or the other concerns brought up by the neighbors were about over occupancy and whether or not the affidavit that we've got from the neighbor is indeed accurate. There have been suggestions or that there are individuals camping on the property in various tents or in RVs. And then there have also been complaints about individuals parked along Hatfield Street who are sleeping in the car. Some of the Facebook posts that we've received have indicated that that this person is in conflict with their neighbors, and in any case, I guess from a recommendation perspective, we are recommending denial of the conditional use permit. We do have a handful of conditions that we're recommending if the Planning Commission were to approve the conditional use permit. That would be limiting the hours of operation, the number, the parking spaces, the amount of customers or patrons who would be allowed to visit the site at any given time. And then there's a slew of other conditions tacking onto that. The one that I specifically wanted to point out is that we are recommending a condition that the approval of the item would be limited to 1 year. It would expire on July 11th, 2023. And if the applicant was in compliance with the conditional use permit, they would be able to come back before the commission and ask for an extension onto that. With that said, I will stop talking and turn it over to you all for any questions that you might have.
Ryan? Is there any way we can move this as far to the beginning of the meeting as possible?
Sure. I think it's within the commission's purview to move it to the first item of new business if they'd like.
I really think it'd make the rest of the meeting go more easily.
Sure, yeah, we can move that one to the beginning.
So all these photos are in the package. Is that the applicant submitted all those comparison photos?
Largely, yes. There's a significant amount of photos in the packet that were attached to the request letter, and then there are some that follow some public comment right below that.
Ryan, this is Mary. Have there been any code enforcement actions on this property as it relates to, occupancy or anything like that are part of your report? I may have missed that because my phone died kind of in the middle of this, but have there been any code enforcement actions? And if so, are we allowed to consider those when we consider this item?
Sure. There have been code cases that have been addressed by our code compliance officers. Those have been for like trash and debris on the property. There have been violations that were submitted for issues with, again, parking in the public right of way. Like I said, noise. Yeah, the police have been called in certain instances to investigate noise. To my knowledge, there have been only two complaints that were validated by staff, and those were the two by planning for the over occupancy issue and for the use of the property. It's worth noting there is one a violation, an engineering violation for the pavement material, that it's gravel, and that one is currently being reviewed.
Okay, thank you.
And to answer your question, Mary, about whether the commission can consider those, I think you absolutely can, as part of the determination of compatibility.
Thank you, Jesse.
So is it the commission's decision to move this to the beginning of the meeting? I'm not hearing anything. I see.
One way, half dozen another. I'm fine either way.
Okay. Well, we can move to the start of new business.
That would be best.
Can I ask another question, even though we have this whole slew of potential conditions, and I know hopefully, well, whether we get them, but only when I look back to, Prairie Street Live, we had a lot more conditions about hours and noise and early and maybe I'm misreading this. This looks like it's way more wide open than what we have for.
with, I might be able to chime in here a little bit. So with Prairie Street Live, so the applicant is requesting to be an outdoor music venue, which they actually can't do, just to clarify that. So the commission can't grant a conditional use permit in this location for outdoor music.
So this is just all the other stuff.
I think that might be one way to read those conditions of approval.
Okay.
So any consideration for outdoor music is basically null.
Okay.
And just to tack on to that, there is a condition in there that says the property is not permitted to act as an outdoor
Okay.
music establishment.
So I'm not sure if that answered your question.
No, that's helpful, because I was just, I know how long that meeting lasted and what all we heard, and it seems like this is much more wide open, so I didn't catch that when I was looking at it, so, thank you.
Any other questions? 4C. Oh, Mary McGettrick, did you have questions? Sorry, I see your hand up.
No, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay. All right, thank you. With that, we will go then to our last item is RZN 2022-027. This is a rezoning submitted by Bowerbird for property located at 603 North Walnut Avenue. The property is zoned RSF4, residential single family, 4 units per acre, and contains approximately 0.69 acres. The request is to rezone the property to RSF8, residential single family, 8 units per acre. And Ryan Umberger is the planner on this one as well.
Sure, thank you. This property is located on the west side of Walnut Avenue. It's roughly a quarter-mile east of the intersection of Rebecca Street and College Avenue. This property is approximately 0.69 acres and zoned RSF4, residential single-family, 4 units per acre. It is currently developed with a 900 square foot single-family home that was built in 1936, according to Washington County records. This property and the surrounding neighborhood were platted as part of the Maplewood addition. There is a exhibit that's provided in the staff report that shows the Maplewood addition and then where the subject property kind of overlays on top of that. So Skull Creek and its associated floodplain and streamside protection zone are not present on this property, though they are present further to the west, kind of along Rebecca. There is, however, a drainage channel that you can see on that hillshade there that bisects maybe the northern third of the property. That drainage channel facilitates drainage for a large uphill drainage basin. And facilitates flow into Skull Creek. It is not a protected stream. There are no hydric soils present on the property. It's not in floodplain, but it is certainly a significant feature of the property. Staff is aware of large volumes of stormwater that flow into Skull Creek and that have contributed to flooding problems for neighboring properties downstream. So again, none of the zoning overlays necessarily apply to the subject property, but there's a significant amount of drainage on this property. This specific request is to rezone the property from RSF4 to RSF8. In the request letter, the applicant states that the request is in line with the long-range planning goals and would allow them to develop the site in a way that's sensitive to native plants and stormwater. We have received public comment in opposition to the rezoning on this one. The comments spoke about issues with downstream flooding, suggesting that would be exacerbated if there were additional development that were to occur. And they also discussed concerns about potentially being developed with non-owner occupied structures that would degrade the character of the neighborhood. Staff is recommending that this rezoning be denied, and I can stand for any questions that you have.
Ryan, this property is a little bit larger than most of them around there. If they were to subdivide the property, would they be able to build what they wanted to build?
So the developers, there was a site plan that was submitted that we didn't include in the staff report, just because this is a land use consideration rather than a development concern. But in the exhibit they showed, they wanted to subdivide the lot into 3 resultant tracts. They would be able to do that in RSF8 zoning based on the lot width requirement, but they would not be able to do that in RSF4. They would be able to subdivide it once with its current zoning.
So probably this is a precursor to that request.
I think that is, sure, I think that's the stated intent of the applicant, I think.
So we have the historic plat here for the addition, and it was originally 3 lots. Were those lots actually consolidated at some point in time, or do they actually still exist?
Yeah, so I don't have the information on.
Because they look like they're 3 lots exactly the same size as 615, 617.
Yeah, the property line adjustment at least predates the information that I've been able to dig up.
But they could. So do we currently consider all these other lots non-conforming?
Yes.
And we've never changed anything in our zoning to deal with pre-existing lots?
The stated purpose of the RSF8 zoning district is to bring into compliance historically platted lots. A lot of them were platted with like 50-foot lot widths, and so the lot width requirement in RSF8 is 50 feet.
So to tag onto your question, Commissioner Madden, there are some things you can still do with a non-conforming lot as far as building or developing on them. Our code does outline those types of requirements. So occasionally there are issues sometimes where people will try to go beyond what they can do with a non-conforming lot in the area. Oftentimes that triggers a rezoning. We've seen that pretty commonly in this area, where somebody actually would rezone from RSF4 to RSF8 at that time, just to kind of avoid those situations. But I'm not sure if that helps.
But otherwise, they could subdivide and then they could do ADUs, and they could do several legal steps that wouldn't require rezoning.
Correct.
Is 622 North Willow Avenue, is that a 50-foot lot, just for scale?
Sorry, can you say that last part? 622, is that a
50-foot wide lot?
Oh, I don't have that information in front of me. I can get that to you.
It looks like it is based on 615, 617.
And I do know that 615 and 617, yeah, are 50-foot wide.
And probably also the next block down are the ones on the east side of Walnut.
It's approximately 50 feet, yeah.
Is the main reason that staff's recommending denial about the drainage, or is it about density and that sort of thing?
Yeah, it primarily has to do with the drainage on the property. This is an area where staff has frequently supported rezonings from RSF4 to RSF8.
Any additional questions?
Sorry, my audio keeps cutting out, but if we were to grant the RSF8 and they were to subdivide into 50-foot lots, would there be any triggers or recourse that the city has to manage drainage issues from this site, or is that then let out of the city's hands?
Sure. Yeah, there are certain protections that are offered. I think this is discussed a little bit in the staff report. So I think staff's concern here is that the development of these properties is likely not to exceed 10,000 square feet of added impervious surface area. So if you exceed 10,000 square feet of added impervious surface area, you get the full extent of the drainage criteria manual. If you are developing less than that amount of impervious surface area, then it would be subject to the requirements of the green stormwater practice sheet. To be completely candid, I would not hazard a guess as far as what the difference is in those requirements, but our engineering staff did express some concern about the green stormwater practice worksheet being able to sufficiently accommodate the amount of drainage that's coming through this property.
So where does the drainage go? Because it stops on this property and it doesn't look like it gets all the way to the creek. Is it in a pipe underground?
It jogs, you can see just slightly.
Oh, it goes way northwest?
Yeah.
In that other. So those other lots that we're seeing there, Skull Creek actually goes through the backyards of the houses on Willow Avenue.
Correct.
Okay.
At 50 foot times 200, which is about how deep those are, it looks like is 10,000 square feet. So that trigger of, unless they pave the entire property, that wouldn't trigger anything.
Right.
Any other questions? All right, well, that was the last item on our agenda, so appreciate everybody's time today. No, we don't have any further announcements, so we can go ahead and adjourn today and see you all on Monday evening. Thank you all very much, and thank you for the patience on the technical issues. I appreciate that.